Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. Welcome in on a Tuesday morning, the 13th. I know it's not Friday the 13th, it's Tuesday the 13th, but it doesn't feel very good this morning, does it, Jazz fans? High hopes. Hey, 14% chance of drafting first. Then you add in the chance of drafting second. And, you can add in third and fourth, too. And it still doesn't add up to the most likely scenario, which was the Jazz are going to draft fifth. And here we are. The Jazz with the maximum drop. The Wizards with the maximum drop to sixth. A lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger. People letting it all out on social media. I mean, I could have guessed that was going to happen, but now I don't have to because I could literally read what our listeners and Jazz fans had to say about this and what the national media had to say. Tanking doesn't pay. Let that be a listen to you. Wag that finger. Oh, man. And it is disappointing. Now, I will say, and we'll hear from Justin Zanik, his comments coming up later this hour. I will say that the Jazz had more than one mission this season. Certainly had the mission to tank, mission accomplished. Now, why did they tank? A couple reasons. One, they did want to draft as high as possible, and they did want to maximize their chance of getting Cooper Flagg, and that did not work out. So that is legitimately disappointing. I'm sure they hung for their head for a second and felt sorry for themselves over that. And everybody should be allowed a little brief pity party, and then you got to get back on the horse, whatever cliche you like, and get on with the job. But they did have another motivation this year, and that one they accomplished. In 2021, the Jazz made a trade, and they sent Derek Favors to Oklahoma City. And at that point, Derek Favors had a lot of injuries, was not anywhere near his peak, and Oklahoma City didn't really want him, but they took him because they got a draft pick. Protected, top 10, 9, 8, whatever, in 2024, 25, and 26. The Jazz did not want to give up that pick, and they didn't. So by finishing with the worst record, they guaranteed themselves. Now, there's one more year that Oklahoma City could claim that pick, and after that, the whole thing expires, and Oklahoma City took the contract, and they got nothing for it. So I expect the Jazz are going to be tanking again next year. I've always thought that was possible. I thought if they did get lucky and they got Cooper Flagg, maybe there'd be a path out, and you could just have a good team and hand over the 18th or 20th or 22nd pick or whatever it is to Oklahoma City and say, that's late enough in the draft, no big deal. But that's not how it looks right now, is it? So the Jazz can still get a good player at 5. And Hans Olsen did an interesting thing where he was recounting all the recent NBA most valuable players. We know Jokic went in the second round, and Antetokounmpo went in the middle of the first round. There were a lot of MVPs who went third, fourth, seventh. Now, obviously, the Jazz can't get the third or fourth pick. If that's where the MVP, a future MVP is, well, they're out of luck. But there's usually a very good player on the board at 5. So it's up to the Jazz to figure out who that is and get that player. Or trade that pick for something so good that nobody cares if somebody uses the 5th pick and gets a good player. And you don't worry about who else is on the board then because the trade's that good. And so now we wait to see, what they do with it. Because the job isn't over. There were multiple paths forward. The door has shut on one path, and that's disappointing. I get it. And this is a safe space. If you want to let it out, tweet at us, call at us, use the app. You can send in your takes. Now, there's one take that doesn't sound good to me this morning. Now, I suppose it could be true. I don't think it is. I talked about it yesterday. But it just doesn't sound good right now because it sounds self-serving. And that is the take that the draft is rigged. Now, if you choose to go with that, you've got good company. I watched a clip pulled from a podcast where LeBron talked about, monkey business, and even he couldn't believe he went to Cleveland and Kyrie went to Cleveland, and he mentioned Patrick Ewing back in the 80s, and, you can go on and on, right? The thing about getting all worked up over the number 1 draft pick is how often do you really get a legitimate star who then carries your team to a championship? I mean, Orlando was really excited to get Shaquille O'Neal because they thought they were getting what Houston got. Houston got Akeem Olajuwon. And Akeem, although there was a time he was demanding a trade, I know because as luck would have it, I was there on a job interview exactly when it happened. I didn't get the job, and I'm very fortunate I didn't. But I was at a desperate time in my life, and I would have taken it had it been offered. And that was about, when would that have been? That would have been about 92. Yeah, maybe it was 91, but I think it was 92. Would have been about 1992. And as luck would have it, they worked it out. They got through their hard times, and he was a champion in 93 and 94. Amazing. And Orlando thought they had that when they got Shaq, and they did get to the final, but then Shaq left. Although he ultimately won 4 titles, he didn't win any for Orlando. And LeBron went to Cleveland. They thought they'd get titles. He left. They hated him. They burned his jersey. He went to Miami, won 2 titles. He came back. We know he got one in Cleveland. They loved him. And then he left again. The odds of you drafting someone number 1 and then getting a championship, not good. We can go through the rest of the history of the draft. I mean, Kyrie and LeBron both went number 1 to Cleveland, and they did get Cleveland 1 title. The NBA. I know people were going through all these rigged scenarios. Yeah, and they took care of New Orleans. They took care of San Antonio. Man, they're taking care of some small markets. Does anybody realize San Antonio is like 3 or 4 markets smaller than Utah? And does anybody realize that New Orleans is like market 50? They're like 20 or more markets smaller than Utah? That's funny. Huh. Interesting. Anyway, I know a lot of the rig stuff is flying around. And man, if LeBron's going to say it on camera, it's not going to go away. So I guess you can say it too. I just don't think it sounds very good right now because I know Dallas moved up with a 1.8% chance. And that's a long shot. But nobody was saying it was rigged just a week ago when a team with a 1.5% chance of moving up climbed 10 spots. That'd be your Utah Mammoth. That was just good things happen to good people. Wow. Okay. So Utah in hockey cashes in on a 1.5% chance of moving up, and that's okay. That's great. But then Dallas cashes in on a 1.8% chance at Utah's expense, and that's horrific. I mean, am I the only one who sees any possible conflict there? And sure, I guess you can argue before you send it in, you could argue, well, the hockey team got lucky and a legit drawing, and the basketball team benefited from a rigged drawing. And some of you probably want to argue that this morning. Okay, I mean, you can argue it. I can't disprove it. I can't prove that something doesn't exist. Doesn't seem like a great take to me right now. Seems kind of self-serving, but whatever. Maybe this will console you. Dallas was super excited. We saw the video of Nico Harrison coming out of his chair like, 1,000 volts of electricity. And I saw the sarcastic tweets, sell it, yeah, you're acting, sell it, make it look good. Okay, does anyone think Nico Harrison's really going to put together a championship team in Dallas? Now, maybe he'll do it. Maybe he is being wrongly, and I mean wrongly chastised for that Luka Doncic trade. There's an argument he should have made it that, Doncic isn't a champion. He's out of shape. He's just going to have injuries pile up because he's out of shape. And I think it's a strong argument for that. We're seeing injuries pile up to guys who are in shape. I mean, John Morant, he's got issues off the court, but he's in shape. And he has the injury, and, he's out. Damian Lillard's in shape. He has the injury. He's out. He's probably out next year. Last night, Jason Tatum looked like an Achilles the way he reached for the back of a heel, which I didn't see live, but then there was a replay I did see where he did reach for the back of the heel. Now, they'll confirm whatever it is later this morning with an MRI. But let's assume it is an Achilles because he reached for the back of his heel. Well, that means he's out for all of this year and next year. He's in shape. He's never been out of shape. Tatum's always been in excellent shape. And Doncic is carrying around this extra weight. Now, Dallas didn't get enough for him. I buy that argument. But moving him, not a terrible idea. However, it has settled Cooper Flagg, not just with a team that is lacking in talent. It has some talent, but it's 32 and 33-year-old talent. And the 32-year-old big man is hurt a lot. AD is hurt a lot, and he's 32. And Kyrie, 33, and he's got an ACL. That's not good. I mean, he's going to miss the first third or half of the season. If he's not himself all of next year, who's surprised? If he has a minutes limitation, who's surprised? Now, I don't really know how his rehab is going to go. It's hard to know the future, but we know what's happened before. We know it's at least 7 or 8 months. And then he's got to get into shape, and he's missed camp, and, they got to bring him out slowly and protect the rehab. Yeah, I just don't see it. I don't. That's pretty major surgery. So if they don't win it next year, now you're dealing with 33 and 34-year-olds next summer. Is this really going to work in Dallas? It's exciting they got Cooper Flagg, and he's a very good piece of the puzzle, but it doesn't look to me like they got the right guys around him. And it doesn't look like to me they have a path forward, because I don't think they can trade Kyrie for anything right now. What are they going to do? How are they going to get the rest of the team? Harrison's learning to win and growing up there and biding his time, and then he's going to move somewhere else. And whoever that team is, that's the team that can really celebrate. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll win a championship in Dallas. Yeah, I'm not seeing that right now. That doesn't make any sense to me. As a matter of fact, that makes no sense at all to me right now. And at San Antonio, maybe they'll draft Harper. But there's already people saying that's not a good fit. Harper and Castle both need the ball. They're not cut out. I mean, no knock on either guy, not calling them selfish or anything. Their skill sets overlap. They're not cut out to be on the same team. Does San Antonio really believe that? Are they going to make a trade? Time will tell. But there is a chance that San Antonio would be willing to move back to spot number 3, 4, or 5 and draft somebody else. So is there a chance the Jazz still move up? Time will tell. But it's at least worth the conversation. And I don't know if they've had it yet, but if they haven't had it yet, they'll have it pretty soon. So, all right, there's more to talk about. We got games to talk about last night. That's pretty interesting. The Knicks series feels like it's over now. We've had 8 teams knocked out of the playoffs. It's about to go to 12 with this round, and 5 of them have suffered major injuries. Assuming the Warriors, who are now down 3-1, lose because, I don't know, hamstring's a major injury, but it is because of the timing of the injury. In fact, he can't play in this series after they win game 1, missing Steph Curry. So the Warriors, obviously the Celtics in trouble down 3-1. I don't think they were going to win last night, but we've seen more miraculous rallies than last night. We've seen it multiple times from the Pacers in the final minute in this playoff. And I think New York had finally gotten control of that game and was going to win it. I do think that was probably what was going to happen, but I was still sprawling the couch in front of the TV because I wasn't completely sure. And that's why I was watching when the injury happened. It happened pretty late. But there were still, 3 minutes or whatever left, so you never know. And then obviously the Bucks and the Grizzlies were already with Lillard and Morant, injuries knocked him out. Cleveland, assuming they lose to the Pacers, they've had injuries to half the team, and they're down 3-1. So, injuries are really playing a role here in the second round. Three of the 4 teams that aren't out yet but could go out, injuries. And the only series that's 2-2 is one where people are largely healthy. So there you go. And that's the OKC-Denver series. So we can talk more about the playoffs later this morning. We're going to be talking about the draft lottery, where the Jazz go from here. That's coming up later this morning. Stay with us. DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. Coming up next, Steve Cleveland's talking hoops and talking BYU and talking NIL money. Stay with us. Good morning. DJ and PK is proudly presented by our title sponsor, Black Desert Resort, Utah's premier golf resort. All right, time to talk hoops with Steve Cleveland. He joined us yesterday before we knew the outcome of the draft lottery. He'll reference it in passing. But we had a lot of issues, including playoff series, including the massive amounts of NIL flowing around BYU. Just massive. I heard another story about that. Made my jaw drop. And it wasn't about football or basketball. Steve Cleveland didn't see it coming, as he will admit, although he also wasn't completely surprised by it. Here's Steve Cleveland with me on 97.5 The Zone. Donovan Mitchell. For the people here who love him, is he ever going to make it into the mountaintop? Or for the people here who hate him, will he always be frustrated and there will be some relief/joy? Because, man, what a roller coaster ride this series has been for the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, and obviously Garland not playing early on in this series had an impact, and that's bad luck. But the Pacers look awfully good, despite the fact that they're playing the Cavs, and down 3-1, you got to feel like the Pacers probably are going to win this thing. But tough for Donovan, tough for the Cavs. They've been the best team all year. Had a great season, and obviously losing Garland for a bit, and he's back, but probably not as strong as he was. And the Pacers, it seems this younger group seems to be playing with a great deal of confidence and getting contributions. Siakam, Nesmith, Embiid, Halliburton. Night in and night out, it's the same guys, and they're playing well. So a lot of confidence, and once that basket starts looking, really, really big, it's hard to turn that thing around. And Cavs are going to have to do it defensively. And they lose 129 to 109 the other night. It doesn't look good for him, and I feel bad for Donovan because he's had a year unlike any other he's ever participated as a professional. But the Pacers seem to be on pace to find themselves in a position to win, to compete for the Eastern Conference title.
Obviously, Cleveland's had a lot of injuries, and I've got a theory about this, and the flaw in the theory is that I haven't coached a big-time game and felt a full arena staring at me while I decide whether or not to put a player back in the game. So I'm going to give you the theory, and I know you didn't coach in the NBA, you coached in college, so it's a little different, but you're way closer to it than I am. So here's the theory. I personally, like a lot of people, am bugged by how many regular season games players miss. I don't think that players don't want to play in most cases. I think in most cases, teams are trying to protect them because they're seeing the injuries pile up. And I think teams have been vindicated because the injuries do pile up. The way there's so much running and cutting and the way you're expected to rotate on defense, so much starting and stopping. There's so much pressure. Bodies are breaking down. And it's not just load management and we don't want to play and we don't care about the regular season. It's real. Bodies are breaking down. In the playoffs, the Cavs now have had 3 of their 5 starters injured and a key player off the bench. The Celtics have had to sit their star players at one time or another because of injuries. The Warriors right now are hurt because their star player has a hamstring injury and they don't know if he's going to be back for this series, and they could be eliminated, in the next week. On top of that, we saw Lillard go down with the Achilles. We saw John Morant go down in Memphis, and that's off the top of my head. I'm probably missing somebody. So I think instead of sitting all these guys, that they still play them a lot, but instead of, I think Jerry Sloan was ahead of the curve here. He limited Stockton Malone to 36 minutes, and they didn't like it, and Stockton really didn't like it, but they respected Jerry, and Jerry's like, I'm extending your careers more than that, and you're going to break down. So he took John out 6 minutes into every game. Every game, John came out 6 minutes into the game because he didn't want him playing a ton of minutes. And I think that's right. Now, the thing that's changed, because the game has changed, if Jerry were coaching today, he'd probably need to draw the line at 32, 30, or 28 minutes. But I haven't been a coach. Is that realistic, Steve, when you're sitting there and the whole gym's looking at you and you're like, I'm just not going to play. I'm holding this guy to 28 minutes because I need him healthy late in the season. And I see how many players are breaking down in the playoffs. I just listed like 7 or 8 players, 9 players off the top of my head. What do you think?
And impact players.
Yeah.
You know what? I think there's a way to do this, and I think obviously whether it's the GM or it's the head coach or whatever in the NBA is to kind of educate the public to what we're doing and why we're doing it. And you don't see that much. You don't hear a lot from them because there's an appearance that if someone's not playing, one, they're either hurt, or number 2, we're trying to protect them. But I honestly, when you look at it, and when you gave us the statistics, it's right on. I mean, they're playing 82 games plus a postseason.
Right.
I mean, plus 100, close to 90-some games in any given year in and year out. There are going to be injuries, and there's going to be not just physical injuries, but mental and emotional. And I know, as a coach, and I remember being as a player, nothing is more debilitating to your mental frame of mind is being hurt. And there's a lot of people that will question or watch from outside and go, why isn't he playing? He's got to let it up and he's got to do this. He's got to start, the whole thing. And it's like, no, you can't do that. Not when they're already playing close to 80 games and then add on another 10 or 15 games. It's just the body wears down. And we're talking about guys that have been in the league a long time. And you look at Curry, it's amazing he hasn't been more injured and what he's going through. But, he's the guy that first comes to my mind in terms of playing a lot of minutes. And I think also, too, when I'm looking at the Pacers, and some of these teams with more youth and they're younger and they're athletic and they haven't been as prone to injuries. The Pacers have been pretty healthy. I don't remember them having a lot of guys down. The Knicks have had their share of, but the Knicks seem healthier than they've ever had been. Obviously, the Celtics, the Warriors, and even Denver, who's had some injuries, is still kind of in the mix in this thing. But I like OKC, not just because everybody's expecting them to win because they were the number one seed and so forth. But again, you got younger guys that maybe haven't had as much mileage on them, and the tread on those wheels isn't what it is for a lot of these guys who've been playing for 10, 15 years. So I agree. I mean, it's something that needs to be communicated, needs to be talked about with players, with the community, the fans, the fan base. I think when you do that, then the fan base becomes educated, and they realize, hey, if you want to see these great players play for 10, 15, 16, 17 years, then you got to understand we're not going to play them every night. And it's not like they're prima donnas or they got a little nick here, nick there. It's the longevity of a career is dependent upon a coach. And you mentioned it, Jared was one that managed time. If you do that and people buy into it and understand and are educated, we'll see some of these great players play longer than we've ever seen them play. But right now, obviously we're in the playoffs, but 82, I know they're flying in jets and this and that, but that's tough on the body, and no matter who you are. And so I agree with you. I think something has to be done because we want to see the best players playing at the biggest during the biggest moments.
I'm going to draw some arbitrary lines in the dirt right here. Let's talk number one draft pick. We all know Cooper Flagg's going number one. Let's break number one picks historically into three groups. There's the championship super hype tier, which Shaq, Tim Duncan, LeBron James. We all knew who they were long before they came into the league. We expected them to win multiple championships, and they all lived up to the hype, and they all won multiple championships. Actually, in that group, everybody's got 4 or 5 titles, right? They lived up to the hype and were magnificent. There's another group of players that go number one, and they are good players, but they're not on that tier. But they have long careers. Blake Griffin, Derrick Rose had some injuries along the way. Kyrie Irving, that type of player. Now, there are also players who are just busts, who should have never, ever, ever gone number one. Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz, DeAndre Ayton went 3 years in a row, and none of them should have been number one.
Yeah.
Where should the expectations be for Cooper Flagg? I don't think anybody thinks they're going to be in that third group. And I know you could probably divvy this up into 4 or 5 groups, but where should the bar be set for Cooper Flagg?
Well, it's pretty high already.
Yeah.
And especially, you mentioned Simmons and Fultz and some of those guys that it didn't play out, and whether it was injuries or it was physical or mental issues, whatever the circumstances were. I've watched Cooper Flagg play a lot. I've watched him interviewed. There's a maturity here that is unlike anything I've seen recently. And he must be surrounded by, obviously, good people, whether it's family, it's agents, whatever the circumstances are. But I do like the maturity of this young man, and there's not a single part of me that believes that this kid would be a bust or that he would be injured. I think I've watched him play enough in college and read enough about him, and he seems to be surrounded by people who understand the game. They know what's best for him. I mean, those of us who live in Utah that are Jazz fans, there isn't anything that would make everybody's day more than to see Cooper Flagg playing for the Jazz. But that being said, this young man seems like everything I've read, everything I've listened to, he seems to be really prepared for the moment. I just can't imagine this kid being in the category of those that, really, Fultz, Simmons, the guys you mentioned, there was a lot of hype about them. But I just believe this young man has been surrounded himself with good agents, with good physio guys that take care of him. I've watched him play. He competes. He's got a high basketball IQ, and I think he's going to be here for a long time. And who knows? I mean, injuries do happen, but I just don't see that happening with Cooper Flagg. And I'm just hopeful that we can figure out. I guess we've got a 14% chance as Jazz fans to maybe see him playing for the Jazz. But, whether you're the Wizards, the Hornets, the Jazz, or the Pelicans, everybody's in those communities and cities are hoping that Cooper Flag is part of their program for the long term.
The best time to learn information, and I suspect when you had a bunch of information, the best time for you to give it is long after the games are over, in the off season, in casual conversations. And I had a casual conversation in the past week since we last spoke with you with somebody who played at BYU. And they're not of the age that they could partake in any of the NIL stuff. So naturally, it's what we talked about.
Right.
And then this player, ex-player, says, "I got so much money, the golf team's swimming in it." And he says, all the players who matter on the golf team are six figures, and some are a lot more than that. Now, I assume that Keakina, who's a state champion, Lone Peak, just played in the U.S. Open qualifier they had last week and qualified out of the local for the sectionals. So now he's got to play 36 holes in the sectional qualifier to see if he qualifies for the U.S. Open. This is a kid who's really, really good, right? High school state champion, qualified for the U.S. Open sectional. He's still in high school. Okay. So I assume that he and Oklahoma State wanted him, and they've got like 11 NCAA championships. They've won every decade. They've qualified 73 times in 74 years or something like that. They missed in 2012 one time. They go to the NCAAs every year, and they wanted him and didn't get him. So BYU must have come with that. So given the era you coached in and what's happening now, have you got your brain all the way around this? Have you heard similar stories about even the Olympic sports are doing well at the Y?
I have heard that. I didn't verify any of it, but I've heard that. And although you caught me off guard here with the golf team.
Well.
I mean, okay, I wasn't thinking that way, but it makes sense. And I don't know how, whether it's men or women, whatever the sport is. I think it's equal rights for everyone, and
I think it goes beyond that, and I think you can speak to this too. I think the BYU fans legitimately take a lot of pride in these other teams, and they create a lot of excitement on campus. Now, they don't create football excitement. Let's not get crazy, and they don't create men's basketball. Let's not get crazy, but women's volleyball, men's volleyball, women's soccer, off the top of my head, those three, I've seen those crowds. They're great. Now they're in the 5,000 range. They're not in the 50,000 range, but that's great. And I think that even though it doesn't draw fans the same way and have the same energy, there's a lot of pride around what cross country and track athletes have done individually and as teams winning championships. So
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I agree with you. And it really, BYU's done an amazing job. And I've had relationships with the soccer coaches and the cross country coaches and more recently and being around them and being at events where they're at. And there's an expectation for every, you're right. You don't want to say this in an appropriate way, but you look at all the cross-country championships that BYU has won and track championships. And, 10, 15, 20 years ago, kudos to them. And, there wasn't NIL money. There wasn't a portal. There weren't the things that we see today. But as I look at these teams and I watch them and I know the coaches, and it's just a completely different environment. And I know at BYU and being there, not just many years ago, but as I'm on campus and I go to different events, it's like Final Four time. It doesn't matter. There's so much excitement. There's so much energy. The fan bases. I've watched those soccer games. They sell out those soccer games. I've not been to a cross country, tournament or any of that nature. I don't know if fans are coming out for cross country and some of those types of things. But certainly for the majority of the sports, there's a significant fan base and an expectation, and there's a great following. So, yeah, it is different. It is different, and I don't think it's going to change at BYU. They have the finances. They have just outstanding coaches, and they've got a community there that supports them. And it's amazing, as you mentioned earlier, the number of people that show up for what in the day were, whether it was women's soccer or men's soccer or a cross-country team, you'll see a few thousand people out there. And that tells you the support, no matter what the sport was. And when you start looking at track and field and cross-country and the national championships they've won, there's a buzz there. There's a buzz there in that community. They're supported in ways today that have never been supported financially, as well as physically and emotionally, and showing up to games. So it is different, so different than when you and I remember, being in college, and then I remember it and you remember it, and, watching collegiate athletes. There's just a different commitment. There's a different energy, and there's a different expectation.
You walk some of those athletes into Crawford Hall at UC Irvine and listen to the gas. Back in the day, am I right?
Oh, man. I love you. All 3,000 of them. That's like 2,500.
I was on a folding table sitting on a stage.
I don't think there's nobody in this state that can pull that out and be talking about Crawford Hall at UCI. Nobody except you and me.
I was sitting on the stage, and it was a folding table, and I'm plugging everything in, and they're coming in for the game, and they're setting up folding chairs, and I'm like, wow, this is wild.
I can't. Hey, listen, I'll tell you what's wild is the number of concerts. I can still remember the concerts they'd have there, and I'd be standing, as a student athlete, I'd get as close as I could to whoever was playing and I was singing. But I can still remember these huge speakers just blasting away in that little small venue. And today I have a real problem with hearing. So,
well, we know why.
Yeah, now I know why.
I'll just say Alta High has a bigger gym than Crawford Hall.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Nice to see you, bud.
All right. There is Steve Cleveland. Good to talk to him every Monday morning. Replay it for you early risers here on The Zone. Hey, a reminder, Ethan Miller with Teton Wealth will be live in studio with Hans and Scotty G today to help with your retirement plan. Tune in or visit retireteton.com. All right. We're going to take a break. When we come back, more on the NBA playoffs, more on the draft lottery. That's all next. Stay with us. Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. Welcome in on a Tuesday morning. And I know a lot of you Jazz fans are in a bad mood. Heck, some of you probably aren't even here because you're in a bad mood and you don't want to talk about it. I don't blame you. It was disappointing. Would have been cool if the Jazz had gotten the number one pick and they got Cooper Flagg. Would have felt like it gave them a leg up in the rebuild. Although there's many moves still to make. And we do know the history of the number one pick. A lot of them don't win championships, and if they do, they don't do it for the team that drafted them. Or in the case of LeBron, they do it only after they broke in that city's heart and left, and then later returned. Crazy story. So they'll have to figure out another path forward. And I am intrigued. Is there a possibility of a trade at the number 2 spot? There are people who think San Antonio is going to make a move. That Harper needs to go at number 2. He's the second best player, consensus pick. They can get the guy that they want and need later at 3, at 4, maybe at 5 if they were to make a move with the Jazz. Who knows? But that they should make a move because Harper's not a good fit with Castle. Now, maybe they don't see it that way. I don't know how the Spurs see it. But it's certainly worth a call there to see what happens. So I think the drama is just beginning here. I think the story's just beginning. And I know fans tend to be there for the winning and the championships. The media tends to be there for the stories. So I might be a little more intrigued by this than the rest of you right now, but I'm intrigued with it. And, if Ainge gets the number 1 pick, there's no intrigue. You take Cooper Flagg. But as I said last week, if they draft number 2, I'm intrigued. And certainly at 3, 4, or 5, I'm intrigued. Is there a player he loves at 5 that he thinks is the guy, right? The best player in the draft is sometimes still on the board at pick 5. Now, maybe not this year because of Flagg's obvious talent, but there could still be a really good player. And Hans Olsen did a good job yesterday running through all the players who've been MVPs and where they're drafted, and several of them were on the board at number 5. So even if it's not an MVP, find a really good player. Under the lock theory that you need a top 10 player, a top 20 player, a top 50 player, I think that's the ideal. But that's not really how NBA teams are constructed in this era under this collective bargaining agreement. And that is why I think we're seeing teams were a lot, just not overwhelmed by. They're just not good enough. But no one's good enough. Everybody is struggling to get that roster stacked the way you'd really like it stacked so you can run off a series of championships. Maybe that's why we keep getting a different champion every year, right? Boston gets one. Denver gets one. Milwaukee gets one. Yeah, Milwaukee got a championship, and then did they win another playoff series? Those guys have gone out in the first round 3 years in a row. It's just hard to sustain it because you don't really have the top 10, the top 20, the top 50, and then a collection of really good role players. Denver's held their starting lineup together, but not their bench. And they lost game 4 because their bench got outscored 35-8. So there's a lot of things that go building in the team. It would have been cool to get Cooper Flagg because he could have been a big piece of the puzzle. But maybe they can still get somebody else and get that top 10 player later. I think maybe they get it next year because it could be tanking again, and that draft's supposed to be even better than this one. Even better. So there are a lot of possibilities out there. Despite the massive amount of disappointment the Jazz fans feel this morning because they didn't get what they wanted, which is that 1-in-7 shot, that 14% chance of getting number one. But we always knew it was basically a coin flip. It was not quite, but almost 50-50. They're going to draft 5, and here they are. If the people saying it's rigged, they'll never help a small market team out, except the people who claim the rigging claim that San Antonio and New Orleans, that they've cheated for them, right? And I was watching a Ringer podcast with Bill Simmons and 3 guys, and I watched LeBron doing a thing on ESPN, and he was talking about how it magically went right for Cleveland, and come on, who really believes that? And New Orleans got a break after the team was owned by the league, and they were struggling to find a buyer. Wink, wink, buy the team, will get you the number 1 pick. Yeah, but it's AD, and later the Lakers tampered and pulled him away. And what did New Orleans ever win with AD? So let's not get too hung up on number 1 pick as the path to a championship, because history says that's not exactly how things usually work. Maybe it would have this time. Maybe it would have. But the Jazz are going to have to find another path forward now. And I do think it's interesting, this just slows down the rebuild, and so what use are the older players? Now, they've held on to Clarkson so long that maybe they just ride it out and take that money back. Maybe not. Maybe they'll trade him as an expiring contract and they'll get something. We'll have to see how that plays out. But really, I think this brings up the question, what happens with Markkanen? Does he get moved this summer? Man, I got to think there's a good chance that happens. Now, a lot of things are going to happen in the NBA. What deals are going to be available? I'm not going to guarantee it happens because there's too many moving pieces, and there's too many moving pieces that no one team controls. But I can see where even if they don't move him, the Jazz are motivated and they're looking for the deal. And for that matter, for Collins too, for John Collins as well. He's coming off a great year shooting the ball. It's hard to believe his value will ever be higher. And you look at his age, and man, if they're just going to sit here and, draft another 19-year-old and draft another 19-year-old next year, I just don't see where, based on age, Collins and Markkanen make sense. They have value. Get them to a better team. Now, maybe you have to wait for the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes to play out, because teams will be playing for him, and then they'll pivot to plan B if they don't get him. So I don't know that it's going to happen right away. But Markkanen didn't want to get moved right away. And he waited to sign his extension, but he was always going to get his money. But the way he waited makes me think he really thought he might get traded at midseason if he signed it right away, so he didn't. And if he wasn't going to trade it at midseason, the next opportunity to trade him is this summer. So stay tuned. I think we got another developing story right there. All right, as far as the Jazz reaction, what did they think after the bad news and the way the lottery played out? Well, the vice president, the GM, Justin Zanik, JZ, met with the media, had some comments, and here's what he had to say. A couple minutes from Justin Zanik now after the outcome of the draft.
Justin, just your reaction to getting number 5. Obviously, not the number you were hoping for.
Sure. I mean, it's my second time being in the back room watching the lottery unfold. It happens really quick. It actually happens in the reverse of how it's announced on TV, and so it was over pretty quickly. And this was always the most likely individual outcome that we expected and kind of prepared for, given that the flattened lottery odds since 2019. So we were prepared that this is a very real possibility, and we're excited to add a good young player to our team. We've got the work we've been doing for the last 2 years on this particular draft. We get to kind of put plans in motion now and have a bunch of guys get into our gym and create a competitive environment to really evaluate these guys. This week at the Combine is going to be really, really productive for our staff, especially our scouting staff, to see these guys up close. We have Coach Hardy here and Danny and myself along with our staff, so we have a bunch of interviews to do, get to see these guys and start talking to them in person and really start drilling down on the possibilities. In reality, this is another young player, an asset that we can add to our team, and this is one of the main reasons that we have decided to stay flexible and have a bunch of assets here to be able to move up, move down, and really put together pieces and find the right combination of players to take this organization forward, and the number 5 pick is certainly a part of that.
How much hope did you hold out for that number 1 pick? I know a lot of Jazz fans are thinking, this is the year. I mean, they've never had it before. There's some disappointment right now among Jazz Nation. What can you say to alleviate that disappointment? Say the rebuild is still on track. You could still get a positive guy here that can help this team.
I mean, of course, everyone has high hopes. In reality, it was a 14% chance to get the number 1 pick. Frankly, another team, obviously, with a lot less odds than us, they were the first time they got the number 1 pick tonight, too. But the rebuild is on track. It always has been. Whether, we got number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, this is a good young player in a very, very good draft that we're excited about. And so take this opportunity that we've been given and make the best of it in terms of making the best selection that we can and make the best decisions to move this organization into a championship competitive place.
There's Justin Zanik on the outcome of the draft. Time to move forward. Time to be practical. They always knew they could be drafted 5th. I said this earlier this hour. They tanked on purpose. Yes, they did. I believe that. They don't want to say it out loud because they don't want to get fined. That's just wasting money, and why do that, right? Why get on the league's bad side any more than you already have by tanking? But it was twofold. Yes, they wanted to get the number 1 pick, and no, they did not, and that's a disappointment. But they also wanted to make sure that they didn't get shut out and weren't drafting until 21. And the previous management, under Dennis Lindsey, traded Derek Favors to Oklahoma City and gave him a top 10 protected draft pick. The protection drops to 9 to 8. And so they don't want to give up that draft pick. They didn't make the trade, but they don't want to give up a draft pick. They would rather draft top 8 in a draft next year than give Oklahoma City pick 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever. So I think we're going to have another year of tanking. And for those of you who say, I'm done with the NBA, I want to move on, I would say, it's your time and it's your money. Watch whatever entertains you. If that's the hockey team, fine. If that's college basketball, fine. If that's college football, you put your money and energy there. They overlap a little, not a lot. I get that. Whatever it is. Save your money for Major League Baseball coming in 5 years. I don't care. Real Salt Lake, whatever. Maybe you just switch and go to concerts. You can blow a bunch of money going to concerts. They're expensive. Maybe that's your thing. Hey, spend your money and your time however you want. I'm not here to, knock yourself out. It's up to you. Some of you will stick it out, ride it out. And I get if it takes a while, you distance yourself from it a little bit. Hey, when the Padres were going through their lost decade, I mean, I wasn't hanging on every game the way I was hanging on every game in the late 80s when they were good, and the late 90s when they were really good. Even in the 2000s, they had some really good seasons. And now they got this great run going, except last night when the Diamondbacks, when the Angels hammer them in the 9th inning. Yeah, that was rough. It's way more fun. They're good again, and everything turns around. Nothing lasts forever. The bad times don't last, and neither do the good times. As long as your team doesn't move away, you're still in the game. Those are the people to feel sorry for. A couple teams left San Diego. Obviously, we've seen multiple teams leave Oakland. Saw the Sonics leave Seattle. Until that happens, it ain't over. That's a kick in the teeth. This is a speed bump. We'll see what's next. All right, DJ and PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. What's next for us? What is trending? The headlines are on the way.